Well, what were you drinking while you were reading it? That can be
Just water.
just water? Okay.
I was in high school, so I drank tea probably while I was.
But do I remember much about it? Good question. The only book in high school that Mr. Foley took pity on us for was The Way of All Flesh. We started reading that. We just were not able to penetrate what was going on. And so he actually came in and started reading notes to prepare us for there was a test, and if we didn't pass the test, he wasn't a good teacher. So he basically gave up trying to get us to actually read the text and started giving us the notes so we could pass the test. And I guess we did. But by the way, many years later, I went back and looked at that book and started to read it and realized this is for old people to read, not for teenagers in high school. And as an adult reading it, I was, whoa, what an impressive book. Was not impressive when I was a kid. On the other hand, when I read Robert Heinlein, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, I loved it. I thought that was absolutely great. Years later, I decided, let's look at it again. I looked at it, and it was horrible. So your age, your perspective, your experience definitely changes the way you look at particular literature.
Good question, though. But
Yeah, so if you have a favorite, email me as a suggestion. Can I do the one I'll already say is if you pick Ayn Rand, no. Anybody know who Ayn Rand is? Good. Don't pick her. Not really a philosopher, actually. Popular novelist, but not really. Atlas Shrugged. He's considered a philosopher by folks that don't actually study philosophy. So that's my conflict with him. But so there's a list there.
I've got some things that you can look at. There are some new ones, by the way. I can no longer update this
Website because the university stopped supporting the software that I used to do it. Plus, they took away my computer because it was no longer safe to have on the network because it was so old, and the crank broke, so I couldn't turn it on anymore. That old.
That was a joke too, but in a way it was true. My jokes are kind of okay.
So
That's the second, and you could start working on that, from the very beginning. So that 3,000 words really doesn't look like a ton of things to do by the end. And then the other thing that I will ask is every class I will ask a quiz question. And the idea of the quiz question is basically to take roll, because I used to think, well, if I got a response from you, you were in class. Of course, folks who don't make it to class want to know what the quiz question is, and I never say no, so I've told them. So basically everybody gets to know what the quiz questions are anyway, and so it really doesn't work as roll, but still that's kind of something interesting I get to ask you at each class. Like, for example, today I'm going to ask you to send me what you remember are the 10 Commandments. You ever heard of those? That's a memory thing, right? I'm not proselytizing a particular, the Jewish religion or the Christian religion, but the 10 Commandments, if you had to memorize them when you were a kid, how many of them do you remember now? And that's the question, right? I'm not asking which are the 10 Commandments really. I mean, because there are differences of opinion over that. So I was raised Roman Catholic, so I have, a set, that I learned as a kid. I've had students say, no, they're not really the right ones, these are it, as if there would be an actual right one. But if you go back to Exodus There's probably at least 2 sets, basically, plus they're written in paragraphs, so you really don't know how to number them. You know, so it's not like they, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're Mel Brooks, you remember he thought Moses came down the hill with 15. You remember the movie. And we ended up with 10 because Moses dropped one. Oh, these 10 commandments. Yeah.
I love that movie.
15. Sorry. I've been ruined by things like the Monty Python and such. But so today, email me what you remember of the 10 commandments. And if you don't remember all 10, you can make up some, which is fun. If you go to my my notes. Oh, why does it do that? Very good. Oh, this happened the first day that I tried this machine. If it's in secure mode, it won't go to my page. So here's some of the commandments people have sent me that are wrong. This one is here because that's not how you spell that word.
No, it's not.
That's a different, you know. Thou shalt not give a quiz on the first day of class. Pretty ingenious, I thought. Don't piss off the boss. Don't make golden cows. That was actually, of course, an issue if you remember when Moses comes down the hill, Mount Sinai. Yeah, so there's, do not have class when it's minus 25. You know, so people give me pretty funny things. I like always feed the dogs, read before class. One of them was do not talk about philosophy with your workmates or something. Here you go. Thou shalt not read philosophy out loud to your co-workers. Those are fun. But it's a memory thing. And the reason I bring it up is because I'm thinking about what the goal of teaching philosophy, an intro course is to introduce you to the history of thought so that you get an idea how we got to the point where we think the way we do today. So it makes sense, because an awful lot of the confusion or confustication, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Remember, I've had enough language training that I'm very confused, and I often forget it. No, I have trouble sometimes. So throw a sock at me or something. We used to do that at work sometimes if you were listening. Called Ushniki, right? And you started to drift off because it was like 2 a.m. and there was nothing going on. We had a sock full of like sand, and we would throw it, and that would wake people up. You know, that kind of thing. What was I talking about? I forget.
Quiz questions?
Quiz questions in general. This one in particular is a memory test. I'm convinced that we remember everything we've ever experienced. That our mind is kind of we've got so many neural connections, and besides that, I like the theory which is referred to as the orchestrated objective reduction theory, which you can look up. It's fun. I'll just show you where. two main folks are Roger Penrose, who's still alive, and by the way, you could actually pick him if you like. I don't have him on my list, I don't think. Maybe I do. But in any case, he's a mathematician. He was a co-author with Stephen Hawking in the book The Brief History of Time. And Stuart Hameroff, who is an anesthesiologist from Santa Fe, he's put over 4,000 people to sleep, almost the same number I have, except he uses anesthesia for it. And then he wakes them up, as he points out that the only reason people pay him is to wake them up, not to put them to sleep. Kind of an important aspect of that, for operations, right? And as a result of observing people as they wake up and the things that they are aware of, despite the fact that while he was watching them, they were clearly unconscious, so many people are aware of things that have been going on in the operating room, usually from looking from above, etc., that he's convinced that we have like a cloud, a quantum cloud around us that's essentially our soul, if you will, right? And that we are quantum computers and not simply Turing-type machines like the laptops and things. And so to try to explain how quantum affects our thinking and why we might even have an explanation for why we are free and not following macro-causal cause and effect relationships. Very fascinating for me. A lot of folks think of it as the current magic. Some of my friends disagree with me every time I bring it up. No, that's etc. But there are actual tests that they're doing to try to show it. Sometimes it fails, and they have to change the theory a little bit. So it's an ongoing, interesting issue that's associated with our understanding of quantum mechanics. And if you think about it, every single object is made up of particles that are quantum particles. And so, as we'll see how we got to that, it really is fascinating, a fascinating story. But that being the case, that just magnifies how much our minds are able to remember from our experiences, even though just the neural connections alone would be enough for us to be able to, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says, we have as many neural connections as there are stars in the galaxy. So that's actually, if you have a computer at home, I don't know how much RAM that would be, right? Random access memory. But if I ask you, for example, you're wearing a pair of ruby slippers and you're looking down and you click your heels together, what do you say?
The Wizard of Oz?
There's no place like home.
There's no place like home. You didn't hear your hard drive running crazy, to come up with that. It was right there, just on the stimulus that pulled that up, right? How many folks have seen the movie The Lion King? Oh, well, everyone, actually, right?
Me. No.
Horrors. So let me ask this. Why did Mufasa die?
Scar was
Can you picture the whole scene?
yeah, because Scar pushed him off along with the king.
Actually, I would argue that the main reason Mufasa died is because he didn't move Fasa.
That probably would have helped too.
That's a joke. Oh. But the point is, you can recall that. Yes? You probably played out the whole movie. You remember the music too? Bum, bum, bum. By the way, I started off as a music major, so I still like to sing and do things that I shouldn't, because I discovered after my first semester I didn't have something called talent. So I had to switch to something else. That's how I got into philosophy, actually, because I had to find something else. I didn't know
what the heck I wanted to take. Remember, the Vietnam War was going on, and if I didn't find something to switch to, Vietnam was what I would be switching to. So I looked through the catalog, found philosophy. It had 18 credit hours of free electives, so I thought, aha, I'll switch to philosophy. Take those 18 credit hours of free electives to find what I really do like, and then switch again. Of course, my very first philosophy course, I walked in, and it was like, it was, at the college at the time, it was a senior course. It was what everyone had to take in order to graduate, and you were expected to really need to be a senior in order to take it. In fact, there were students smoking in the class. It was almost like a French cafe. The teacher didn't smoke in that case, although some of my other teachers did. But in this particular case, the teacher, Mr. Williams, looked at everyone and said, if God is all powerful, can he create a rock that's too heavy for him to lift? And I thought, well, God is all powerful, so he can do anything. So he can clearly create a rock that's too heavy for him to lift. Wait a minute. My head literally split. And I had to find the answer to this paradox, right? And it took me 8 years to finally figure it out. And by then, of course, I was addicted to philosophy. So that's how I got into philosophy. However, so I'm convinced you actually remember every experience. It's just a matter of how do you recall them when you need them. What kind of stimuli do you need in order to bring up a particular set of memories, and so on. What was your breakfast this morning?
Mine? I actually don't know the name of it, but it was like
But you
eggs, bacon, spinach
It was food.
in a bowl.
Call that food, right? Ciba in Latin, if you